All right, good morning, everybody. We are going to get started with our final day of the SEL4 Summit. Hope you all had a good time at the dinner last night. That was great. Got a bunch of interesting things on the schedule today. In addition to talks, we're going to start out with some updates from our SIGs, the special interest groups, and then an update from Kent, and then a talk in our first session from Lei Mao. And then later today, we'll get to our Birds of a Feather session. So if you hadn't weighed in yet, this is your last chance to do that. And we'll figure out over the break what we're going to do. We'll have two of those before lunch, 2 after lunch. And then we have our getting started session after that with the SEL4 micro kit. So that's kind of the preview of the day. And all right, so we'll get started with our 3 short updates from the SIGs from Matt and Everton and Yanyan. We'll do them in that order and then turn over to Kent.
Cool. Yeah, so first up is the special interest group on SEL4 multi-core and user level verification. What's that about? Multi-core verification concerns the verification of kernel configurations using multiple cores. That includes both multi-kernel and symmetric multiprocessor configurations. In user space, we're interested in verifying user components, possibly their interactions with other components and with SEL4, and also just properties of systems of user space components. So why do we have 2 topics in one SIG? I guess, first of all, there's a limited number of people. Actually, there's not. But but if you want to do either of these with sort of full rigor, then you need to think about concurrency between user space components and the kernel, and potentially between multiple components. And also because proofs about either of these are most useful when they're connected to each other. Yeah, so usual things that we want to do in SIGs is essentially identify opportunities for collaboration, coordinate, and report progress. Brief history. At last year's summit, there were 2 Birds of a Feather sessions, essentially on these 2 topics. The multi-kernel verification session was dominated by discussion of multi-kernel configurations, and that was because Kent's talk on that topic generated quite a bit of excitement about that and the possibility of being able to run systems with multiple cores active in a almost verified configuration. So that was kind of cool. Talk a little bit more about that shortly. We had a TSC meeting a couple of months after that, decided to form a SIG around these topics. They nominated me chair, for better or worse. And since then, thanks Wikipedia. That's not to say there has not been progress. Just in this room, we can identify a bunch of people who are doing some kind of work on one of these topics. We've heard about some of them. The one thing that I will call out that has not been specifically talked about at this conference is Proofcraft. After the Birds of a Feather session last year, Proofcraft have formulated a plan about how to get from here to verified multi-core systems, including SMP, with lots of useful steps along the way. I don't know if that plan is public, but I've seen it and it's a solid plan. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Gavin just said that he's not sure that it's public, but it's not particularly secret, so maybe it could be made public. They have received some funding for that already and have done some work on that. There's a little bit more in progress. We're seeking more funding to progress that further. The steps along the way include various levels of verification for multi-kernel systems, and then progressing on from there to full SMP. So that's really cool. The progress just hasn't been happening in the SIG. I think there are some challenges for making a useful special interest group. On the multi-core verification side, there's definitely a concentration of expertise necessary to progress that, and that's in Proofcraft, of course. So there's questions about how can a SIG be useful to that. In user space verification, we saw all the people on that slide. There's a huge diversity of goals and approaches in that space, and there's a whole bunch of dimensions that produce those sort of different approaches. Like are we talking about a single component or systems of components, and so on. There's one place where I think the SIG could be quite useful, and that's to examine the question of whether we need to do anything about the SEL4 proofs to make user space verification, so really deep user space verification, more useful and doable. We don't quite know the answer to that question yet. So what's next? I think in the worst case, the group might be sort of me and Proofcraft talking about how we want to connect up our user space verification with their sort of multi-core verification. And if that's all it is, well, that's probably still useful. So, but if you want it to be more than that, then pop along to the discourse and tell us what you'd like it to be. Cool.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Just keep moving right along. Everton from TII.
So this is just the discourse group that we have on the SIG VMM. And basically, since last year, actually last year it started from also for a birds of feather section that we had about the VMM and people talking about the importance of having a standard VMM or more standardized VMM in the SL4 spectrum. So there was some discussions at that session of some features that it would be nice to have in a VMM and something that were missing by the people. And then we created this SIG VMM discourse group. There were some activities. We could have more activity for sure, but there was some people saying about, for example, remove some dependencies and also about the VMM tutorials or SL4 VM tutorials. But the idea actually is to ask for people to contributions. So if you have like some ideas for the VMM or the problems that you are having with the VMM or the features that you want to see in a VMM or even the work that you are doing in virtualization for SL4, I invite you to post over there your queries, your challenges. I don't know, the idea is to foster the discussion. And one thing that we were thinking, or we are discussing last year actually about this standardized VMM, how we could have something like that. And I have been seeing this year, especially, a lot of people talking about using MicroKit in the future right now or in the future. So this can be one opportunity for us to discuss on, I know that Ivan is working in the VMM for MicroKit as well, but he is doing a lot of stuff, a lot of great stuff, and it would be nice if the community, if us could help in the VMM for MicroKit. That could be our standard VMM, let's say, and then we can build new features on that and do some branches, I don't know, but we can work on that VMM. I think that it will be the future for us in the SIG VMM. But, yeah.
Great, thanks. And our last SIG update will be from Yanyan from NEO.
Good morning, everyone. I think the benefit of having the update on the last day of the summit is that I can simply listen to the great talks and have an up-to-date summary. So yeah, thank you all the speakers. And rewind a little bit. The SIG is actually created to address the pain of liking of ready-to-use device drivers for SL4 based systems, at least a little bit. Yeah, so we don't have to start to write the serial driver for a new platform when we want to use SL4. Although personally, I think that may be a good exercise. Yeah. So currently, we have like 3 approaches. The first one is we build a driver from scratch based on an OS framework or a driver framework. The second one is we reuse the drivers from other systems like FreeBSD, Linux, or even U-boot. So we provide the wrapper layers that emulates the driver's native execution environment based on some OS functionalities provided on SL4. And the third one is we run the Linux kernel inside the VMs, call them service VM or device VM, so we could get a lot of high quality drivers out of the box. Yeah, and here's a summary for this year. The SDFF continues demonstrating that a powerful and simple design leads to a high performance network solution, and yet it is feasible for formal verification. And more importantly, the development for other type of devices drivers has started. And last year, we saw that we could reuse the U-boot drivers. And this year, it's very great to say that we can also reuse the USB drivers from the NetBSD. And it opens the door to other drivers as well. And thirdly, we gladly to say that the network throughput improved a lot for the VM-based approach, and actually one service VM can serve multiple user VMs. So basically, this is the update from me. Any questions or am I missing something?
No, this is great.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know what community update precisely means from a semantics point of view, but the topic that someone asked me to give a quick talk about was explaining how we'd potentially want contributions and how people to find out information in the community, how to participate, use SEL4 and make SEL4 and all of the stuff on top of it bigger and better and simpler. And so I was first just going to quickly go through here all of the channels that can be used. This is all on the doc side, on the SEL4 website, but I figured that at the end these slides will get uploaded somewhere, and so they're basically just walls of links. And so I'm just going to quickly run through. GitHub is where all of the source code lives, where pull requests happen, where issue tracking happens. Then there's Mattermost, which is a ephemeral Slack-like messaging platform hosted by Trustworthy Systems, I think, and anyone can sign up and log in. The sign up link is, I forgot to add it, but it'll be on the slides. But basically there is a page on the discourse, which I'll get to next. So the discourse, or I think someone said we should call it the SEL4 forum, is a mailing list like forum channel which has a lot of threaded discussion and communication. Everton had it up before for the VMM SIG, and then of course there's the mailing lists. So the announced mailing list is where a lot of announcements from the foundation and for the community get sent out, and then the developer mailing list is also where threaded-based email discussion can happen. So a lot of question and answer stuff that's very async can happen on the developer mailing list, and then also on the discourse. For more ephemeral discussion, there is Mattermost, where you can just jump into a room like an IRC and say, hey, I've got this question, does anyone have any answers? And sometimes you'll get an answer, sometimes you won't get an answer, but people will at least see your question. And then the developer hangouts are a fortnightly video call that happens in alternating time zones. some of them are supposed to be friendly. They're all supposed to be friendly for Australia, and one of them's friendly for Europe, and one of them's friendly for America. Yeah, they're medium friendly for Australia. It's like 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And there's actually a shared calendar, a Google Calendar, that has all of the developer hangout events in it, and also like the summit. And that's, if you go to this link here, it's basically, you can subscribe to the calendar, and it also has all of the other links. Then as for information sites, you've got the SCL4 website, the announced mailing list, and then there are some 2 social media sites, I think managed by the foundation. I think Foundation/Gernot. I think Gernot's the Mastodon. Okay. And then there's a YouTube channel and a documentation site. And so basically the other thing I wanted to talk about was how do we like contributions, which sometimes is a spicy topic, but in general, I think there's artifacts that the foundation produces, which is largely a verified microkernel, and frameworks and libraries and tooling and technologies and documentation on top of that. And it's mostly all open source, which means that people are allowed to contribute and free to contribute and sometimes encouraged to contribute. And that can often be unclear about how you can have successful contributions and how things actually happen, how decisions get made. And so I think there's kind of 2 or 3 categories of repositories here at the source code level. There's the proofs, L4V. At the moment, no one really contributes to that. And so there's not really any process set up for that other than making issues. But then the kernel itself, yeah, the kernel itself is the one that's like GPL licensed. There's a trademark for deploying projects using it, and ends up being quite centralized, which means it has to have quite centralized decision making. And for that, there's various ways that people should be able to propose changes and make requests for changes and raise issues. And like everything I'm saying here are kind of, apart from stuff that's related to trademarks and license agreements, are guidelines around shaping a contribution process to make it easy for people to find, like to get their questions answered, to propose changes that they want to have made, and to also give us the opportunity to ensure that what gets accepted is something that everyone else who's using SCL4 can rely on. Because the proofs are the main thing that gives its credibility and its reliability, but there's also a dependency on the TSC and the committers and the reviewers for accepting changes to the kernel that are like good changes. And then the proofs back that up. Or the proofs that stand in front of it or they stand behind it. Everyone has their own opinion. But basically, in my opinion, and probably people in the TSC's opinion, like ask questions, send us stuff, like ask questions on the mailing list, ask questions on Discourse, ask questions on Mattermost, have discussions in the developer hangouts. Like basically it's like asking why things work, why things are done the way they are. It's like there isn't a lot of information flow from why things were done that's freely available. The documentation always comes a bit late. And I think we're always trying to be open to explaining things and even being challenged, because often things were done away because they were just done a certain way and no one really thought about it at the time for the wider ecosystem. GitHub issues across all of the repositories, like open tickets there, like, we're not going to get upset for opening many tickets. Worst thing is we'll close them. Main thing is we'll have discussions. But open tickets for a particular feature don't imply an endorsement. So I know that there are quite a few tickets open on like the SCL4 GitHub that may not be closed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're planning to actually do it in the way that's proposed in the ticket. PRs for functionality changes to the core repos should largely be anticipated, which means that you should have an issue or there should have been a discussion, because essentially taking and landing a change is going to represent a follow-on investment of maintaining that change and like basically incorporating it into the design. And And often what happens is, of course, changes get proposed because someone has a request or has a feature, but it might not necessarily fit with the vision of the project, or it might be like not necessarily maintainable for the current set of resources that we have. But that doesn't mean that we're not wanting things from that, but it's more that we'd like to have input earlier on in the discussion. And then that's where the RFC process, which isn't actually on here, is an opportunity for breaking changes to the kernel, because it's a bit rambly, I'm sorry. But there's like the TSC and the core team and responsible for ensuring that changes into the kernel make sense for the kernel's point of view. But then there's everyone else building on top of the kernel who's interested in changes to the kernel that may, that they might have to respond to. And so the RFC process is also to give them a chance to have input and feedback on changes, so that it's predictable, it's unsurprising, and things just move ahead. And we don't get angry at anyone who's making changes in the wrong way or the weird way. The worst thing is we'll probably just not respond due to prioritization. And also, it's like if anyone wants, and then also it's like we want to shape contributions and shape contributors and work out ways that work well for people who want to contribute. So it's more of an iterative process. That's it. Sorry.
Okay. Are questions for Kent or any of the SIG representatives?
I think I'll answer your question in two parts. One part was identifying that one of the things that currently could be done better is a prioritization of what features should potentially be worked on, and then allocation of resources to working on them. And then the second part to the question is GitHub Projects a solution to that problem? That's at least what and I don't want to talk about technologies just because it will potentially devolve into this tool is better than this tool. But I do agree that I think there probably should be a way to sort of have almost a prioritized queue of here are the features or here are the issues that we're going to try to work on each week as a TSC.
So I have some answer for that. We have actually tagged a bunch of issues with this is good for beginners. Not consistently and not in that many repos, but in some. So for the microkit, that might be a thing. By default, we don't have a lot of beginner issues. Like getting into the kernel requires quite a bit of expertise. And by default, they are, most of them, if they're not assigned to somebody, they are like, we would like to do this, but we don't have time right now. Usually if somebody assigns themselves to an issue, that's a sign that they're working on it. We also don't do that super consistently, but as a hint, basically, that's something that should work. As for projects, they're good for coordinating a collection of issues. Like if you want to do something bigger and it's not just one issue, but I don't know, 5 people could work on this thing. I don't think anybody, if you talk to the person responsible for the repo, so for instance, Ivan for the microkit, and I don't know, you guys want to work on the libvmm, I don't think anybody's going to object to saying, okay, let's open a GitHub project for that and have a bunch of issues and collect them here, and we can coordinate that way. But the important bit is the talking about it beforehand, the coordinating with Ivan and so on, and then deciding what you want to do. I think on that we can be fairly open. It doesn't have to be GitHub projects, could be whatever tool you want, but if it turns out that plenty of these happen, we might want to unify and so on, but so far there doesn't seem to be a huge demand. So I don't think that's because there's no contributions, it's more because there are not many projects as such that would require, lots of issues. One thing that Kent often does is a collection issue that say, if you want to do this bigger thing, here are all the other issues that are related to it. So that's another way of doing it. But yeah, technology-wise, we're fairly agnostic on that, I would say.
Yeah, I think one thing we'd potentially be open to doing is on things like the VMM to we should have a one-off developer call at a time that's convenient for people who are interested, and try to just bootstrap a project management system.
Yeah, completely agree. I just want to point out we actually are using a bunch of GitHub projects. So I'm mostly me, but anyway.
So for the VMM, I think before we jump into any action on the VMM, we have to understand why its performance is so poor. So that requires analysis.
That would be one issue in the project to work on.
Yeah, I think at the moment there is an async challenge where it's like like you guys make a lot of changes and write a lot of documentation, and then it's always like we're always sort of in non-overlapping time zones, and so it's like without that starting bootstrap of like a call where we can sort of just go through everything and get synchronized, have a synchronization point on like where we are, what we want to do, and move forward from there.
Thanks, Kent.